My name is Jessica Ceballos, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, ella. So right now, I am the 11th and 12th grade counselor at Environmental Charter High School in Lawndale, which actually used to be my old high school, and I graduated in 2011. So after high school, I actually went to school in Dickinson College in Pennsylvania. And I got there through the Posse Foundation's scholarship. So my tuition was paid. I just had to figure out where to live and how to get there. Um, and I was there for 4 years, and I majored in psychology and Spanish literature. So in high school, number one thing, I think I was just really friendly. I was friends with everybody. Like I cared for everybody genuinely. And I don't think I ever had any beef with anybody. So like I'm really happy about that. And that's just almost kind of like my personality, which is actually shifted now that I'm older. Like I feel like I'm a little bit more, I don't want to say combative, but I'm okay with like getting into conflict. Um, and but I try really hard not to have any conflict with anybody. Um, so yeah, being really friendly, really helpful and kind to people. But I was also very involved in my school. I feel like I was always busy, um, and not 100% always focused on my academics. Like school was like not my forte, but anything extracurricular related, like I was there. And I probably should have focused more on my academics, but it got me fine, to where I was fine. Um, I feel like I really took that to Dickinson for sure because I was just busy all over the place, even when I was there, just with a bit more independence, which was, I think, what I needed. Because I'm the eldest of four, so I had a lot of responsibilities at home. Uh, and while in college, because I was not like academically prepared, and I feel like I didn't really focus much on studying in high school and like enhancing my study skills, I really struggled my first 2 years of college. Uh, it was actually pretty bad. I was on academic probation for like a year and a half, and that's because they gave me a chance. Honestly, like after year one, they should have kicked me out. And but because I was on a scholarship and they were trying to have a lot of to retain a lot of their people of color or students of color, like I feel, and because of my scholarship, like I feel like they really honed in on resources. I was assessed for like potential IEP and accommodations, which I actually ended up needing. um and I got a lot of counseling, free counseling. Counseling is free in college. uh so I did that for a long time until I finally felt like I had a grasp on college life. My second semester of my second year of college. But it took a lot of work. Like I don't think, even to this day, I don't think I have worked that hard with my schedule the way that I the way that I did in college. Like from 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. on some days, like I had to have structure because I was falling into a really deep depression, and that was the only thing that could really get me on my feet. Um, and then my friendliness, I think, definitely helped my social life, and being involved and finding the right involvements too really helped me. Like it wasn't in being involved just to be distracted. Like I felt like I had a purpose in whatever club I was in or organization or as a TA, or it was my job. Um, and I feel like that really took me, um, like propelled me after that. Once I felt more confident in myself, which I think is something I actually lacked in high school, like as much as I was very well known, like with people, I felt like I lacked confidence. I think once I gained my confidence in college, like I feel like I just blossomed. And I really, really saw myself grow and felt really proud of myself. And I think my junior year is actually the first time I ever got like a 3.8, like ever. Um, and I was like, oh, and fighting imposter syndrome at a predominantly white college and seeing that I could actually handle the workload with everything I was involved in, like, I was like, I belong here. I belong here. This is where I'm supposed to be. Um, and then that's when I realized that, like, with that I really wanted to be involved in psychology and like go into the helping field. So I didn't know I wanted to be a counselor yet. And like once I graduated from Dickinson is when I found a job is when I actually realized what I wanted to do. I feel like so after Dickinson, like I didn't know whether I wanted to stay on the East Coast or go back home. But based on where my financials were at and missing my family, I decided to go back home. And I actually first spent my summer after like I graduated at LMU, and I worked through their Upward Bound program there. And I was already really close with the director at the time because I was an RA for their summer program the summer prior. And so she was like, look, if you're looking for a job, I can give you one for 2.5 months. So I was like, okay, like, let's do it. And it was great. I lived on campus. I oversaw staff doing summer programming for high schoolers at Westchester High School. And uh, there was like this program that was at LMU called City Year. And they were like, oh, we're looking for more core members. I was like, what the heck is a core member? And basically, City Year is like a volunteer program for people who don't really know what to do with their life. And you dedicate a year of your life to just helping students. And I was like, okay, like I like kids. I like working with youth. I majored in psychology. Like I'm not the best at school, but I can help tutor kids. So I was like, okay, let's do this. So I sign up for the program. I go through my interview processes and I get it. And City Year actually was really eye-opening because it humbled me. Um, because it's considered volunteer work, like I didn't get paid. Um, but they set me up with like Medi-Cal, they set me up with food stamps, they set me up with like a living stipend, which was like $400 every 2 weeks. They gave me my uniform for work, and I worked in a fourth grade classroom as a TA. And then in the afternoon, I did the after school program. Now, this was like my first glimpse of like, do I belong in schools? And working with fourth graders and like all levels, actually, like kindergarten through fifth grade, like I was like, I like this. I was like, do I see myself in the elementary setting? Maybe not. But like I would be open to it. And the cool thing about City Year is that because they're so involved in the community, they have a lot of community partnerships as well as university partnerships. So as soon as I was done with my year of my commitment, they actually gave me something called a Siegel Award, which is like an educational scholarship. And that actually, made me put a little money aside if I decided to go back to school. I also saw that they had a LMU partnership and a couple of partnerships with other schools. And I was like, okay, let me look into counseling. And they had a counseling program. And I was like, okay, let me apply. And I got in. Like after I was done with my year, I got into LMU and to major in counseling. But I had just landed another job. And I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity because it was with this chain of schools called Soledad Enrichment Action. And there are continuation schools. Now, for one, like it's already really hard to work with at risk youth. And so I was like, I would be a case manager for these students, basically a counselor because their funding wasn't good. And so I was like, I emailed LMU and I was like, can I defer my acceptance for the following summer? And they said yes. I was like, oh my God, things are aligning right now. So I didn't go straight to school and I worked for a year because I was like, I'm about to go into an intense counseling program and I need to know if I can actually do this. And the cool thing was that I was working with high school students and I loved it. Like those kids like had so much going on in their life and their last priority was school, but I enjoyed the work that I was doing. And I stayed there for another year. And then in that summer that I finally decided to go to school, I was going to school full time and then also working full time. And LMU's program was so flexible with evening classes that it just worked out. So I went to LMU for 3 years. I worked at the high school for 2 years until the school shut down, unfortunately. And then I actually found a new job working at Los Angeles City College. And that's where I finished off like most of my counseling time and working in higher education. And like the glimpse of like, doing one-on-one counseling with these kids who are like super credit deficient, like got kicked out of all of their high schools, to working in a college setting now was a huge difference. And super applicable. Like everything I learned at my other job, I applied to the college job, and more. And then in the college setting, I really learned about like the ins and outs of like what happens on a college campus within the counseling office. And then I was like, I already know as much as I could possibly know. Like I'm ready to find a counseling job. Um, and so unfortunately, the year that I graduated in counseling, the pandemic hit. And so I was really scared. I didn't have a job for, let's see, how much? May, June, July, August, September, October, 5 months. I didn't have a job for 5 months. And I had just moved out of my parents, so I was desperate. And my old supervisor for where I was doing my counseling hours sent me this job listing. And she's like, look, if you're still looking for a job, like check this school out. And I was like, oh my God, it's my old high school. And I was like, I was avoiding applying to ECS, like Ms. Banuelos, Lucy. She had called me, she's like, apply here. I was like, no. Then my supervisor sends me this, and I was like, okay, I'll apply. And so I applied and I didn't get the counseling position, but I ended up being college prep 9 teacher. So I did that for that year during the pandemic. And then once they saw what I could do in counseling, they offered me a full-time position as a counselor, and I moved up into 11th grade. So I went from 9th grade to 11th, and that's where I've been ever since. So my journey has been all over the place, but always in education. I think I feel like one thing that I really notice out of ECHS is like the amount of care that goes into each student. And that's something that has been my favorite thing in general. That like I based off of all of the schools that I've ever worked at, like I can definitely say we go above and beyond um all the time. So I think that that's something that's carried with me, and I think also influenced how I work as an educator. And also I think it's just a good, if I already had that in me naturally, like this is a perfect place for me to like continue growing on that and like how to balance myself even more. Because I think that's been the most difficult part about being a counselor, is that like I can give my everything to students, but I won't have anything left for myself. Um, and that's not healthy for me or my students. So I think my favorite part about being a student at ECHS was just like, because I cared so much already as a peer, like I know what good friendships look like for our students. Like, or I know that as a peer group, people are capable, entire classes are capable of holding each other up with like the right mentoring and the right attitudes. I also know like everything that our students are going through just with different teachers at this time, like especially our seniors. Like senior year is vivid in my head. So I feel like because I completely understand what they're going through, like on the scheduling side, on the academic side, even socially sometimes, like I think that I can really relate to students. Um, my favorite part of the job so far, I think, has been going back into roles that I was in as a student. So for example, like I was part of the first summer bridge program at ECHS, and I was like one of the first mentors that like was part of that program. And now I'm like involved in summer bridge on the other side of things. I was in summer school at ECHS because I failed math. And so I know what summer school is like, and now I'm like putting kids in summer school. Um, and I played sports in high school, and I have been fortunate enough to be able to come back and coach softball, which is a team that I played on with my old coach and teacher, Miss Davis. So all of that, I think, just being able to come back and kind of like finish the story for myself, like at that campus, has been pretty cool. But at the same time, like I see what I was missing, like as a high school student, or I see like because of what I missed out on, like does what I missed out on still exist to this day in time? Um, I finally get to see what like the teacher side of things, and like I have so even more respect for teachers, and like as someone who is engaged to a teacher as well, like I it's not that I've never not understood what they go through, but like there's just so much care and work that goes into just making sure that that school is what it is today. Um, so I think that overall, like those have been my favorite parts from playing a student role and being like an educator role. Um, and I think this year I think has been the most eye-opening for me because last year it was like we're just driving and it's a disaster. We're back from the pandemic and it's crazy. But this year I can finally breathe and like take it all in. So I'm very happy with where I am so far right now. Yeah, I think in my first couple years out of high school, I feel like I was definitely like an environmentalist. Um and I feel like I still adopt a lot of the things that were instilled in me, like composting, recycling, and trash and all that stuff. But I think the part that has really stayed with me is just like educating the community as a whole, and just like community organizing in general. And when I think about environmental teachings, like I don't really think about the science part of things. Like I think about like the social part of things. Well, that's what's really stuck with me in terms of like food deserts, like or just even in general, like access to green spaces, access to parks, access to outdoor activities, and like the effects of um that social environmental part and how it affects our communities, and like being able to overcome and get through like poverty, or overcome and get through like violence. Like I live in a community right now that like has a lot of violence, but because no one is investing in the community. And I feel like that part, and maybe intercession, really is like what's really made me think of my community very differently. Like how can we uplift, how can we change things? And I think that that social justice part of the environmentalism of our school has really stuck with me. And I think that's why I'm also just so involved in my community too, like aside from school, like also outside of school. um that's what's really made me realize that, like, yeah, I have power as this individual to, like, even if I only affect like a team of 18 students, like that's 18 people who I'm giving, you know, structured time to and teaching them how to play a sport, or structured time to and teaching them how to apply to college, like structured time and teaching them how to build a resume. Like it doesn't matter what, like I just want to make sure that like whoever I influence understands like where their role is right now in their community, and like what they're doing to better their families or themselves. So I feel like that part has really stuck with me. I feel like and this is like the counselor side of me is the lack of connection between the classes. I feel is very evident. Like unless like students like played a sport together, or even might be involved in an extracurricular activity, like even in those spaces, sometimes things are very clicky. And from what I remember in my experience, like I was me personally, I was very interconnected with all the grade levels. And I think that has a lot to do with just who I was as a person. And maybe this is an impact of the pandemic. Like people just don't have the capacity to reach out to this many people unless it's their own people. Um, but I wish we had more opportunities for our students to engage with one another. And on a social and emotional level. Not necessarily academics, but like I just think that a lot of the time our students think it's just their own experience and them alone. And I'm just like, yo, like y'all need to talk to each other because if you feel a lack of support and you don't have friends, like I can think of 5 people right now that you can talk to. Just off the top of my head. And aside from that, also like the cultural mental health of our campus, I feel like is still really strained post-pandemic. I don't know what that looked like pre-pandemic, because I wasn't there to experience it, but I feel like we as a school can provide more of a culture of well-being, aside from like going inside the classrooms, outside of doing like one-on-one check-ins with your counselor. Like I wish we could have like scheduled mental health weeks, you know, where we bring in like people to show what mental health care looks like. And I know that that requires funding and money, and like sometimes that's what really stops things from hitting the ground running. Um, and a lot of the times people will say like, well, you need to do that, like sacrifice yourselves, you know, like teachers, the counselors, and I'm just like, it can't always be like that, you know, like this is how burnout happens. This is how um like the lack of it happening again a year by year because people come and go, you know, but if these funds are here for this specific thing, then like this can happen continuously. And I just wish that, yeah, those two things, like the interconnectedness of the classes were more, and more of a cultural, like environmental mental health outlook, like on our campus. Um, I feel like that's also lacking. I'm actually back in school. Um, Yay me. You know, and I have my bachelor's and my master's and a credential. And like I think right now I'm in a point in my life where I want something different. And I don't know when that different is going to happen, but I need to see what's out there. So right now I am taking classes at El Camino College down the street, and I'm taking cloud computing classes, so that I could, you know, potentially see what role I can find myself in the world of tech. So, and technology and all that stuff. My dad is in this field, which is funny because this is a field I avoided like the plague because I didn't want to be like my dad. And now that I'm like 30 years old, I'm like, okay, like things are starting to make sense now. Like, let's see what I can see myself in this field. So I'm barely on class 2 out of 8. So like it's gonna take some time, maybe like in 2 years I'll be done. But right now I just want to see how I can expand myself um outside of like the world of education. Because something that I've learned in my years of counseling is that and in my years of career counseling too, is that like it's starting to be more and more known that like you won't just have one career in your life. And so I'm young enough and in a place where I can try and explore what other things I might be interested in. And so if I can do it and I have the opportunity to, like, why not? So even if I end up being in education for the next 10 years, like I can do that. But if the opportunity ever presents itself for me to like go into a different field in technology, then like I'm willing. And one field that I'm actually looking to go into is in the world of gaming. So I'm a big gamer and I kind of want to see where the role of women is in tech right now, and like how we can use this realm of gaming to like push social movements as well. Because if people have used social media to push social movements, like I'm, or like to create awareness or to teach people anything, like I'm sure in the world of gaming, like people have already done that. Like and or are capable of doing that. Yeah. So I I definitely want to try and see like where my passions in this field like end up growing. So we'll see.